Nice to have everyone here. We're very much excited to be holding this workshop today. My name is Maria Salazar-Ferro, and I am the Director of Emergencies at the Committee to Protect Journalists. Supporting journalists to safely cover elections is a priority for us at CPJ. It is both a time of vulnerability for journalists who can be attacked while covering political events and also threatened digitally while doing their work. We see this also as a great opportunity to talk and to review what are best practices in terms of your security, in terms of your safety. Last year, the emergencies team at CPJ worked with journalists on the ground in India, in South Africa, and in Guatemala. And this year, we've been focusing on the election here in the US. Over this summer, our CPJ, along with our partners at the US Press Freedom Tracker, recorded or have recorded hundreds of attacks on journalists covering the George Floyd protests across the United States. And this has made it really painfully obvious to us how much more need there is for safety support to journalists who are working here in the US. So we're very pleased to be co-hosting this event today with our partners at the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press and the National Press Photographers Association ahead of the upcoming conventions. Today, my colleague Ella Stapley, who is on video here, will be speaking to you all about digital safety while covering the Democratic and Republican National Conventions next month. Ella is our digital safety consultant for the emergencies team. She works with journalists around the globe, helping them to be more secure online. Ella is also a former freelance journalist. She will take you through some of the tips, to stay safe digitally while covering campaign events. But we really want this to be more of a dynamic conversation. So please feel free to send in your comments and questions, mostly your questions through the chat box, which I will be monitoring for Ella. She'll be taking questions throughout, so please feel free to really just jump in. But before I hand over the reins to Ella, I did want to remind everyone that this is one workshop in a series of events that we're hosting with RCFP and NPPA. Next week, there will be 2 legal workshops, one on August 4th for reporters who are covering the GNC, and one on August 5th for journalists who will generally be covering protests. On August 6th, we will be hosting a workshop on physical safety. And again, Ella will be back on August 6th if you want to review anything or if you want to invite anyone else to go through tips for digital safety. I also want to invite you all to follow CPJ on social media. I will be posting our handle here and to review both our election safety kit and our digital safety kit, which I will be posting for you all to follow. I will also be including ways to be in touch with our team and to sign up for periodic safety materials. With all that logistical info, I will be handing over to Ella now. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's nice to meet you virtually. As Maria said, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box as we go along. Maria will read them out to me and I will answer as we go along. I will also be including my email at the bottom of each slide, so if you do have any follow-up questions, you can drop me an email afterwards. I'm always happy to answer them. So without further ado, I'm going to just share my screen with people and turn off my video. Great. There we go. Maria, can you just confirm you can see that? Ludi or Maria, can you see that?
Yes, I can see it.
Great, thank you. So it's digital safety, covering the US political conventions. As Maria mentioned, my name is Ella Stapley. I'm the CPJ safety technologist, which basically means that I work with journalists around the world on all things digital security related. That can range from online harassment issues such as doxing and publishing of fake information about journalists to devices being stopped and searched. So today we're going to talk about actually these two issues. Here is my email address. Feel free to make a note of that and email me if you so wish. So this session is going to cover the following. We're going to be looking at securing your devices, and we're also going to be looking at securing your online data, and that really will focus on kind of your personal private information online and how to better protect yourself against situations such as doxing, and this is when your personal information is published online. So first we're going to talk about securing devices as you're moving from place to place and going into places. Really when we're thinking about, you know, covering these big events, what is key here is preparation before you go. And in terms of digital safety, preparation is really going to save you a lot of heartache further down the line if something does happen. So this presentation will be split in a kind of before and during, and also there are things that could be done afterwards as well in terms of making you more secure. Any questions so far? Okay, so before the event. So the first thing you want to be thinking about before going is what devices you are taking with you. So are these work devices? Are they personal devices? A lot of journalists are using their personal devices for work-related content. So if that is you, then you really need to be thinking about what information is on those devices and how could it put you or others at risk. For example, if your phone or your laptop, for example, is stolen or is broken or, you know, is taken. So journalists are pretty good at this. This is backing up information. So please make sure you back up information, and that includes information on your cell phone. I know people often say, you know, that their cell phone is already backed up to the cloud, but please just, it's a really good idea just to review what content is on your devices, to know what is there and to remove anything that you wouldn't really want anybody getting hold of. And this can be the case if you work a lot of journalists do from your phone. Maybe you're downloading sensitive documents. You know, where are these documents being kept? So quite often when you download a document onto your phone from something like a chat app, there's a copy in the app, there's a copy probably on the device itself, and there will be a copy in the cloud. So it's just really kind of having an awareness of what content is available on your devices. You also want to be thinking about apps and other services that you might be logged into on your device. Is there anything, you know, that you would not want other people to gain access to? And if that could be the case, then it may be a good idea to kind of log out of those apps and just remove them from your device if you are planning you know, on using that device to cover this event. The other thing you might want to think about is how to secure your device with a pin lock. So it's a much better practice to put a pin lock, a code on your phone. So the longer it is, the more secure it is, and that is because it is more difficult to access if the number is longer than, say, if it is shorter. I would be cautious about using biometric data, such as, you know, your face or your fingerprint in order to open up your devices. And this is because legally it appears to be much easier for law, you know, kind of authorities to ask you to open up your device using biometrics than it is for them to require you to input a PIN code. So it's just something to be mindful about that. And just in terms of device security as a general whole, you really want to be making sure that your devices are updated to the latest software version. And the reason for this is that it it helps prevent vulnerabilities in the software being leveraged by hackers. So, you know, if you're using an older model of phone and you haven't, you know, you're not using the latest operating system on that phone, then the chances are that that operating system is vulnerable to malware as well. So it's just a bit of general device security there. So in short, look at your devices, see what information is on there, remove any information that you think could be sensitive, back up the information, and just delete it from your device. During the event, pretty obvious really, just know where your devices are and try to avoid handing over your devices to anybody. This sounds, quite an obvious thing to say, but it's just, just to be aware of that. Lots, if you're going to be plugging your devices into charging stations, things like that, just keep an eye on them. The reason for this being that, it doesn't take a lot for someone either to steal your phone or to kind of plug a little device into it and make a copy of content on there. So it's just keep an eye on them, and also just know your rights with regard to your digital devices. If they are taken, what are your rights with people being able to access those devices. So in terms of device security, it's just kind of like a brief overview. Does anybody have any questions? Are there any questions, Maria, about device security?
There are no questions. There's one comment about how this information is also useful when crossing the border.
Yes, it is. This is basically a slimmed down version of what to do with your devices when crossing borders. Ideally, what you want to be taking to kind of government and official events, or when you cross borders, especially for work-related issues, is you want to be taking what is called a clean device. This is a phone or a laptop which you only use for attending events and or crossing or traveling, and that these devices are later wiped, which means the content from these devices is erased, and in that way you can be certain that you're not carrying pictures of your family, that you're not carrying any sensitive documents from previous stories or any current kind of stories that you're working on. So, device security requires you to do preparation beforehand. It's not something that you can be doing kind of in the car on the way to the event. Quite often I get calls from journalists who are at the airport trying to, configure their accounts. It's really, it's much better if you take the time to do this before covering an event. So moving on to the next part, which is the longer and more detailed section, which is about securing your online data. And basically what this means is this is about you taking control of the information you have online. So what we have had over the past, 10 years, I would say, is this expectation that journalists should build an online profile, and in order to do that, they need to share information about their private life in order to gain followers, in order to kind of build a reputation as a journalist. And what we have seen is that journalists have been, over the past 10 years, publishing a lot of information about themselves online, either through their own social networks or through their media outlet, or through kind of LinkedIn profiles, things like this. And what we are seeing is that this online data that journalists have posted previously is being harvested online and searched through online by various groups of people with different intentions. So, I mean, if we're looking here at the what we call the threat model, so who is interested in your data, and that will depend on the stories that you are covering. But what we are certainly seeing in the US is this, reaction from supporters of, right and left-wing parties, the Republicans and Democrats. So, and their reactions to you and your journalism. So it may be that, you write something about this event, and what happens afterwards is that followers of this particular party will start to harass you online and look for your data online. I'm just curious whether any of you have had any experiences of either online harassment, doxing, I'll talk about that in a minute, or if it's kind of a everyday thing that you're experiencing. Please feel free to just drop either yes or no in the chat. If you want to include a bit more detail, feel free to do that too. And Maria, if you can just let me know if there's any information coming in or comments, that would be helpful.
I'll keep you posted. So far, I've been putting in some additional resources for everyone on legal tools and CPJ's digital safety toolkit, but no questions.
Oh, great. Okay. Yes, I have a resource guide at the end of the PowerPoint as well. So when you're coming to secure your online data, before covering the conventions, the one thing you want to be thinking really is about doxing and online harassment. And doxing is the publishing of your public, your personal information online with the intent to cause some kind of harm. So when we talk about public information, it could be your address, but it could also be your email address, your telephone, your social security number. So it could be, you know, health information about you. And what we are seeing, especially in the US, is this increasing trend towards doxing of journalists by a huge range of groups of people on the internet. So you can see here, there's a headline there from the US, The Guardian. So death threats and doxing for journalists covering extremism. We see here this the story from, I think it was from last week, yeah, with the New York Times. And Tucker Carlson and his fans who doxed a reporter. I've just seen today that a journalist has been doxed by Taylor Swift fans because they did not agree with the article she wrote about Taylor Swift's latest album. So, you know, yes?
There are two comments that I wanted to make sure I passed on. One from Jordan Smith is, I haven't experienced doxing or harassment, but I'm just getting started with investigative work. And then there's a second comment from Jason Redmond about the Washington Post story today on the Department of Homeland Security compiling, and I quote, intelligence reports on journalists who publish leaked documents.
Yeah, yeah. And what they will be doing, and they tend to be doing, is kind of trawling through your social media and kind of putting reports together based on information that's already in the public domain. And we've seen that with journalists covering migration issues, for example, on the border. To the journalist who's just getting started on investigative reporting, that means you're in a very good position at the moment because nothing has happened to you. So, you know, the best place for journalists to be in is that they have not been doxed and that they are in a place now where they can take steps to limit information that is available to them online. Now, the issue with the US in particular is that it has quite lax kind of legislation and law around public data. So, you know, this means that public data about you is more easily available online than it would be in other countries. So, you know, if you buy a house, I think your address has to be registered online, for example. And, you know, I'm not sure if that actually varies from state to state. So it'd be worth, you know, from what I have seen working with journalists who cover the far right, you know, a lot of them have started to use a post office post a PO address for their driving license, for example, instead of actually a home address. So if you haven't been doxed, you're in a good position to start thinking about the risks that are available, that are facing you as a journalist. And like I mentioned,
New question from Stuart. Who wants to know if it's safe to assume that if we cover political events, have an online social media presence, that government agencies in the US are likely monitoring us already. And I had one suggestion so that people can see your face when you're answering questions. If we could, I'm not sure if it's possible, but swap back to video.
Yeah, let's have a look. Yeah, it's annoying why it's not doing that. Can you see me now? There we go.
Yes.
So I would say it would be a fair bet that, you know, governments are monitoring, you know, your social media. You know, I think it depends on the type of stories you're writing. You know, it's not, there is software that will monitor, you know, social media accounts and kind of map interactions. So it's not kind of, you know, an army of people just looking at your account. So, you know, it's a lot easier to do than it was in the past because of kind of automated processes. So, you know, I think it would be, you know, not an unfair assumption to make, if I can be honest. And in terms of doxing, I mean, if you're covering politics, yes, but if you're covering anything to do with gender, race, anything that causes, you know, public opinion to be quite heated, you know, anything around abortion, anything around anti-vaxxers, we see a lot of, you know, animal rights people are very active in online communities, and also kind of vegans. You know, once I had a journalist who had written a story about, you know, extreme climbing, and she'd revealed a place where, you know, a secret place where extreme climbers went, and she got horrendous online abuse because of that. So, you know, the smaller that you kind of, the more niche the community, quite often kind of the stronger the backlash is against the journalist. And I pointed out the kind of Taylor Swift fan example earlier. So I think it's pretty safe to assume in the kind of times that we are living in that, you know, there is a significant possibility that you may be doxxed. No problems to it. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Let's see. There we go. Great. So what I will do in the next part of this session is I'm going to talk through some best practice steps. So the idea of this is for you to go away with some practical advice that you can start implementing straight away. And the reason for this is that the sooner you do it, the better it will be for you. And the reason that you kind of, the reason that it needs to be done now is that, you know, these things take time, and it's also quite a laborious, you know, thing to do. So it's better to, you know, do it maybe 15, 20 minutes every day than to spend, you know, a whole week trying to kind of take down your online presence. And by that, I mean, take down the information that you don't want up there. So it really is about you having control of the information. So the first thing you should do is really Google yourself, but also use other search engines, such as Firefox or Internet Safari. Just use different search engines and look for information about yourself. And the reason you need to check it on different search engines is because they throw up different results. You want to check video as well as photo, because quite often people who harass you online will use images of you and misappropriate them to represent you in a way that could either try to damage your reputation or shame or embarrass you. So, you know, you really want to see what information is available about you in the public domain. And that can be, you know, quite a lengthy process depending on how much information you have out there. So ideally, you know, if I were to Google you, ideally what I would find is just your profile about your work as a journalist, maybe previous places you've worked. I don't really want to be finding, you know, your home address, any pictures of you with your family, or knowing anything about your family. Quite often, you know, I see journalists put in their Twitter bio, you know, kind of reporter at so-and-so news outlet, father of two, husband to so-and-so. You know, this is really quite private information that it is best really, you know, kept private, unless of course you feel comfortable with that. But then you have to know what the possible outcomes of having that data in the public domain could be. So, you know, the next step is, once you see what you've done, what information you have out there, and you've kind of mapped that, you need to be thinking, what information do you want to remove and do you not want in the public domain? Now, if you are the owner of the site, so if it's your Facebook account, your Twitter account, then it's relatively easy. You can just go in and just delete it. Please be aware that when you delete information from the internet, it doesn't disappear forever. It is stored, it's archived. And, you know, it's impossible to remove it. But what you can do is kind of make it more difficult for people to find. Also be aware that if you're deleting information, it takes a while for the algorithms to kind of crawl through and remove that information. This is why you need to do it in advance. If you do it an hour before you enter, then, you know, that's, you know, enter the wherever you're going, you know, to cover the event, then, you know, that information will still be in the public domain. So it's just something you really need to do in advance. if the information is on, sites belonging to friends, family and friends, social media sites, you're going to have to ask them to take it down. If your data is on a site that's owned by a third party, then it's a lot more difficult. You are going to have to request them to take down that data, and it really is just dependent on whether they will do that for you or not. So, have a look, see what's out there, take steps to kind of either hide information by making it private or deleting it. You can sign up, and I really, really, really recommend, if there's one thing you take away from this today, is to have your information removed from the data broker sites such as people.com or white pages. So these sites, which you will use, I imagine, for journalistic research to find people and research people, these are also being used to research you. And you can get your name removed from them if you sign up for a service. So you can have an annual subscription. So you can either, pay for this yourself, and they range from $150, I think, a year, up to however much you want to pay, depending on your risk and how many databases you want to be removed from. You may want to broach this topic with your editor or your media outlet if you are particularly concerned that you are at risk. So there are a number of these sites. One of them is called Delete Me. If you may have heard of that, it's the most popular. And there's another one called Privacy Duck. And what they do basically is they just basically contact all these sites where your data is stored. And these will be public databases, such as the Electoral Register or home ownership databases. And they will just request to have them removed for you. Because databases renew normally every year with new information about you, that's why you have to pay for it as a continuous subscription, I'm afraid. It is worth also signing up family and friends, mostly family. If you're living with friends, for example, then, their names will also come up and they could also become a target. So I would recommend, signing up partners and family members as well to these sites. So once people have started to look for information about you on the internet, what they might try and do is they might try to access your accounts, and they may try to hack them. So one way is to secure yourself against this is really to focus on having good passwords and a password manager, and also using something called two-step verification. And I will talk about that in a bit. I'm going to come back to that. I just want to also pause a little bit and talk about how people find out information about you online and what the kind of process for that is, especially with a focus on the far right. So when you publish a story about somebody who is a member of a far right, or if you reveal their identity, the far right themselves see that as doxing. So what journalists are often not aware of is when you're writing about members, the far right and alt-right groups, if you're revealing information about these groups, they see that as a kind of personal affront to them, and they feel that you have invaded their privacy. And so what they do is that they try to dox you in return. And that is why we are seeing, I would say, a number of journalists who write about the far right getting doxed online. And how this process works is that they will put a call out on chat rooms on the internet where they meet, and they will ask for somebody to find out your personal information online, such as your address, your telephone number. And then what happens is people go away, they look for it, and then they post it in these groups. There is a place on the internet, it's called the Dox Bin, where it's basically a holding bay for addresses of prominent people who will be doxed, including journalists. So it kind of gets stored there, and then finally it gets kind of published. And then what will happen is once your address starts circulating, it will get spread through other kind of far right chat groups and kind of other more extreme groups on the internet. And what will happen is you may start to see then an uptick in online harassment. So they may start to first they'll publicly harass you on kind of your Twitter and your Facebook posts, then they might move into your direct messages and your emails, and then they'll start calling your phone, and then finally, normally what happens is they try to call your house, or they turn up at your house. So what it is a kind of online threat that moves into a physical threat, and that movement may or may not happen, but when it does happen, it can happen quite quickly, and it really just depends on who is interested in you. So it's a good idea to kind of have a think about what kind of people are interested in a bad way in the stories that you write, and what kind of tactics they use. And this can range from, prank calling you, to ordering hundreds of pizzas to your house, to, taking your image and misappropriating it, to harassing your family members, to turning up at your house with a weapon. So the threat range for that is quite wide. So it's a really important thing is to speak with family and friends. You don't want to scare them here, but you do just kind of want to give them a realistic picture of what it means to work as a journalist in the US today, and just share with them how comfortable you feel with them posting, content about your family in the public domain. So what often happens is if they can't get to you, what they'll do is they'll look and they'll find, your partner. And if your partner hasn't secured their accounts, and I'll talk about that more in a bit, what will happen is that they will just dig through their Facebook account or their Instagram account until they find information that can be used against you. Some of that may be including kind of, your date of birth. A lot of people remove now their date of birth from their Facebook and Twitter profiles, but what they don't do is they don't remove pictures of them on their birthday, and people, wishing them happy birthday on, their social media feeds. So, just want to have a look through, and I'll talk about account security in a minute, and just see that none of this information is available really in the public domain and could be used to harass you. So the other issue with this kind of personal identifiable information, or PII, is that it's used to verify your identity, right? So if they have your address and they have your birth date and they have your phone number, what they can do is they can start calling up your bank or your utility company or your mobile phone company and pretending to be you. For various reasons. So it could be that they try to commit credit card fraud on you. It could be that they try to steal your phone number in what is called a SIM swap, which is when they ring up your mobile phone company and pretend to be you and say that, hey, I've changed my address. Could you please send out a new SIM card? Could you port it over to a new SIM card for me, please? So this is why it's really important to really have a look and see what public information is available about you online, and kind of take steps to just kind of delete it and remove it where possible. Another really useful thing is to set up Google alerts for your name, and that way you'll know, if things are coming up about you on the internet somewhere. And another really good tip is to set up a kind of calendar schedule for reviewing your information online. So maybe every 3 months you can just set up, on a Monday morning or Tuesday morning from 9 to 9:15, you're just going to Google yourself and see what information comes up. But if you don't put it in your calendar, time will go by and you will forget. And then all of a sudden there'll be some information that you thought you'd removed and it's resurfaced, or there'll be new information that you didn't know was available about you online. Any questions about that part? So it's a kind of quick go through kind of best practice in terms of protecting your online data.
No questions.
Okay, I will continue. So account security, a really good thing to use is to use a password manager. Now, a password manager is a bit like a safety deposit box for your passwords. I'm not sure if anyone's using a password manager or knows anything about good practices around passwords. You can put some comments in the chat box if so. So what a password manager does is that it creates long and secure passwords for you, and it remembers them so that you do not have to. And I'm going to talk about why it's really important to use a password manager. So if you are a human, like we all are, you will probably be reusing passwords. And the reason for this is that quite often we are doing something and then we realize we have to create an account for it. And we're just like, oh yeah, I'll just put in that password that I use and I'll change it later, which we never do. So what happens is that when you sign up for accounts and you're using a password, so let's just say you signed up for, let's think, the Marriott Hotel, you're using the hotels, you signed up for an account with them and you use the same password that you use for your Facebook account. And the Marriott Hotel, it got hacked. The company got hacked last year, early this year, I can't remember. And there was a massive data breach, including passwords and email addresses and also credit card details, etc. So if you have used the same password to sign up for that as you have for your Facebook, then it means if someone has access to your Marriott email and password, then they will also have your password for your Facebook account. And these passwords, when they are involved in a security breach with a big company, for example, they are bought and sold on the internet for, you know, quite cheap. And criminals buy and sell them, and they create kind of dictionaries of passwords, which are then used to try to hack other accounts. So, you know, what you're looking for in a password is that it should be unique, so you're not using it anywhere else for the very reasons that I mentioned. They should be long, and the reason they should be long, and that should be between 14 and 20 characters or more, depending on your risk, is that because it's not just a guy in a hoodie typing away on a computer anymore. What it is complicated algorithms that are just running hits on your computer, you know, on your account until they crack it. And, you know, for the reasons I mentioned, these hackers, they have, or you know, organized crime or whoever they are, they have dictionaries of stolen passwords, but also most common passwords and dictionary, you know, dictionary words and song titles and poems, etc. So what you're looking for is something that doesn't hold anything that could really be you know, picked up by one of these kind of databases. So, you know, don't use your favorite line from a song. Why? Because probably somebody else is using it. So what you're looking for is really a random collection of words and letters, between 14 and 20 characters, and a password manager can create that for you. You should not include any personal information in your password, such as, you know, your pet's name or your road or your house number. And this reason for this is this information is available online through your social media accounts. And, you know, if someone is interested in targeting you, they will probably have this information. So it's a little bit about kind of password managers and good passwords. As Maria said, she put our CPJ digital safety kit in the chat box there, and you can have a look. There's a section on passwords. So the next thing you can do to really secure your account is turn on something called two-factor authentication. And this is, some of you may or may not be using this already. I think in terms of banking is probably where you've probably most commonly seen it. This is an extra layer of security for your account. So as well as the email address, the password, what you'll also need to enter your account is a code. And this code can be sent to you via an SMS. I think that's probably the most common one that people have. They link their phone number to the account, and then, you know, a code is sent and they use that code to access their account as well as their password. So there are 3 forms of two-factor authentication. Some are more secure than others, but I have to stress that any form of two-factor is better than none at all. So please turn it on wherever you can for all your accounts. And I strongly advise that for any kind of financials accounts, you know, or shopping accounts like Amazon, etc. Why? Because hackers will try to target them. You know, if you annoy, you know, Trump supporters, for example, through an article that you write, some of them are very well organized online and have, you know, sophisticated tech capacity, and they may try to hack, you know, your accounts. So that could be your Uber account, your, you know, your Amazon account. So it really is about kind of making sure you turn on two-factor and using passwords that are long and created by your password manager. Any questions about that? You're very quiet today. Must be a Friday lunchtime. Okay, privacy settings. Please do look at your social media accounts. I know that if you are journalists, if you are like most journalists, you are probably mixing your personal and your work on your social media accounts, less so probably for Twitter, but maybe your Facebook account has, you know, people you've interviewed on it, as well as family members. And you really just want to go through and, you know, look through your accounts and erase information that you are no longer using or have need for. And we've seen this recently with the Twitter hack, where hackers used what was called social engineering, where they rang up Twitter employees and pretended to be someone else and kind of gained access to accounts via that way. And they gained access to very high profile people's accounts, and they probably gained access to their direct messages. So, you know, you just want to be deleting all your direct messages as you go along. If you do want to keep them, if you're communicating with sources through them, it's not the most secure way. You would really want to be moving on to a more secure method, but you should maybe take screenshots of any messages and kind of back them up to a hard drive and just delete your messages. Why? Because if someone gains access to your accounts, what they're going to do is just dig through your DMs and your Facebook messages and just try to find something that can either be used to discredit you or to shame you or to embarrass you. So please just know what information is contained in those accounts. Have a look at your privacy settings. Facebook now has this new privacy, well, fairly new privacy checkup, which is you know, really easy to use, and you can just go through it. Please make sure you know what information people can see about you, especially if you have, you know, people on your Facebook page who are, you know, maybe sources or work related, and you have your family on there. You can set up something called lists, which limits what information people can and cannot see. I generally recommend that journalists, you know, get an official page for you know, their journalism where possible. And now Facebook has recently released extra support for journalists based in the US, and I'm happy to send that information over. So it's now kind of Facebook for journalists, like a work platform rather than a public you know, private platform that you are using for your private life. So what we're really seeing is journalists are using social media as a work-based platform, but it's not something that people have really kind of understood, kind of the general public. So, you know, if you were giving a presentation about a piece of work you'd done, you wouldn't expect a member of the audience to stand up and harass you, you know, hurl racist abuse at you, or, you know, sexual abuse at you. So, you know, this online, this barrier doesn't exist. And I think really the conversation is starting to change a bit about, you know, what is and what is permissible in terms of social media. And so you really want to make sure that your social media settings are strong, and you speak to your family about that as well, because even if you lock down yours, if they don't lock down theirs, then, you know, people will dig through them. If you have Instagram, for example, and you mainly use that for work, I would just go through it and just take anything off that could be personal. And that includes kind of pictures of your favorite places or cafes that you go to or restaurants. Just remove that information. Go right to the beginning of your Instagram profile for the first pictures and things that you posted, because a lot of time that is when we, you know, journalists were using the app, and they were starting off using it, and they were just publishing kind of personal information as well as work information. And a lot of people forget to delete that information, and you can find out quite a lot of information from people through those early posts.
So Ella, there's a request for more info on the Facebook for Journalists feature. I had suggested people could email you on the chat and put in your email, as well as the election safety email, but is there another way that anyone can follow?
They literally have just released it. I think it was last week. So it's for journalists who have an official page. So you have to be recognized as a journalist by Facebook. So you would need to have that kind of blue tick and Facebook kind of page. It's so new, we don't actually know what is, you know, we have, there are some journalists I know who have signed up for it, and I'm kind of waiting for feedback on what they are doing with it. So Facebook has made this only possible for journalists in the US, the Philippines, and Mexico. So it's 3 countries, which is obviously decided are in need of, you know, extra support. So yes, I'm happy to send that information over. Please reach out to me via email. Any more questions about privacy settings and understanding your information? It's really a good idea to just kind of delete as much as you can, really, especially, if you're not using it that much anymore, or, you're using it mainly for work, then take off family. If you're using it more for family, then take off work. So what you really want to be doing is trying to separate your private and your personal. Why? That's because if, people gain access to one part of your life, they won't gain access to the other. So it's really about the more you can separate out your information, the more secure you really will be. During and after the event, location data. So if you're, live thinking about broadcasting or tweeting publicly, you might want to consider your risk and see how the situation is on the ground, and think about, whether you want to be turning off information about your location, although, it's a very public event, so people are going to know that you're there. But, you may want to avoid saying exactly where you're standing, for example, like standing over by wherever you are, and maybe kind of put that out information afterwards when you've moved location, when you're inside. Biometrics, I've mentioned that before. You might want to consider turning those off for going in and just having a PIN lock. And then after the event, just monitor your account for any uptick in online harassment and abuse, and just keep an eye on the kind of types of people who may be harassing you. There are quite common imagery from kind of alt-right, far-right groups. There's the Pepe the Frog, for example. If you start to see that coming up in your feed, obviously Donald Trump kind of references, the hat, for example, then you can be fairly confident that it's more kind of outright kind of supporters that are targeting you. Just a little bit about the far right and the alt-right. I'm not sure if any of you have done much research or you're working on that, but just to be aware that they do vary in terms of their kind of tech capacity, and also how organized they are, and how much they target people. So it's not always the same. It can be very hardcore neo kind of Nazis to kind of bored teenagers who are kind of looking around and playing around with the idea of the alt-right. So there is quite a broad spectrum there. If I've had cases where I've worked with journalists where they have been doxxed, their address has been published online previously by a kind of more extreme far right group, but later that address has been left in chat rooms and kind of passed along, and then it was picked up later by young kind of teenagers who then doxed this person again. But the threat then was not quite as, it wasn't quite the same. And they were also not located in the US, they were in different countries. So just to be aware that if you have been doxed once, you probably will be doxed again, because that information is out there in the public domain and you have been kind of designated a target. Any questions?
None. I think you keep going.
I'm at the end of the presentation. So I have here extra resources for journalists. So the CPJ, we have quite a library now of support for journalists. There's one about removing personal data from the internet, which walks you through kind of a step-by-step process of how to do that. Really, if you sign up for removing your name from data broker sites, look at your privacy settings on social media. There is the option also that Google gives you to, if you live in a house, to blur the image of your house out on Google Earth, so that you cannot, so that somebody cannot kind of poke around the outside of your house from the comfort of their internet. So in this resource, it will tell you how to do that. We also have a resource on how to protect against online attacks, kind of best practice to do during, before, during, and after an online attack, how best to protect yourself. There's also an online harassment and well-being guide, because getting hatred and streams of abuse shouted at you through the internet all day, every day, can be exhausting, and there's a lot there about kind of thinking about how to build a community. The New York Times have done an open source self-doxing guide, which is really useful. And this kind of walks you through how to basically dox yourself, which is kind of the steps that I was talking about earlier. So it walks you through how to look up information about yourself online and how to shut down, you know, as much settings on your privacy settings as possible for social media. The Rory Peck Trust, based in the UK, has some sections on trolling and doxing and best practice around social media that might be useful as well for you. And PEN America has their online harassment field manual, which has a lot of information about, you know, how to better protect yourself. It also kind of gives you more the kind of wider picture of online harassment. Any questions at all? Very quiet.
Yes, sorry, Ella, I missed two that were in the, not in the chat box I was in, but here we go. There's a question actually that's, I think, more for me. Will people have access of a recording of this workshop? And yes, we were recording the workshop, so I'm happy to share that with anyone. Please, I've been sharing our team email, which is electionsafety@cpj.org. So please just email me and I can, I'm happy to send it your way. And then there's a second question. Do you trust cloud storage for sensitive information, or is encrypted local storage more secure?
Yeah, I mean, I think that will depend on your risk. So, I mean, if you are, anything you store in the cloud by the very nature of it being on the internet is insecure because the internet itself is insecure. So, if you are storing things in the cloud, there are two ways that people can access that information generally. The first one is through the company itself. You know, they can hack the company, or they can, you know, the government can subpoena the company for that information, or they can access it through your own account. And that then means that that information is only as secure as your account. So if you're using a password manager with long, unique passwords with no personal information contained in them, and you have two-factor turned on, you know, the risk of people accessing that account are much lower. They may still be able to access it through, you know, spyware or malware on your computer, you know, and they may do that either through sending you an email or a message with a link or a document in it, which you are, you know, encouraged to click on or download, and that will install malware or spyware on your computer. Or they could physically, you know, install it if your device is taken, for example, at a checkpoint or at a border, and you lose sight of your device, for example. It doesn't take much to infect a device, to be honest with you. So it really depends on, you know, what information you are storing, who is interested in that information, you know. So if it's something that is the US government could be interested in, you know, I probably wouldn't be storing it in Google, because, you know, the US government does subpoena companies for data on users. So you might want to be looking there at, you know, an encrypted local storage, such as an external hard drive. You can encrypt documents and store them in the cloud, so they are encrypted but stored in a non-encrypted cloud service, or there are encrypted cloud storages that you can also use and pay for. So I hope that answered your question. I'm happy to answer any other kind of digital security questions that you also may have. It doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily has to be about kind of online.
Can you see the questions now, Ella, the chat box, if you want me to read them to you?
Are the number of doxing incidents on the rise in the US, Eddie? Yes, well, they were until COVID, I would say. So in the lead up to the election, we were seeing quite a lot of that, just given the current climate in the US at the moment, in terms of such the division between kind of political parties and supporters. So I would say yes, and I will say that, you know, this will be a problem in the run up to the election and after the election, if the election, you know, is happening now. Just to be aware that that could be an issue, and I would say that you should take some steps to try and secure your information. Yeah, places like Taiwan, yeah, of course. So, you know, each government has a different way of working with the internet, and some authorities and governments are, you know, more active on the internet than others, and some of those are more public. So we often think of like China, you know, as a kind of like very, you know, into hacking, or the Syrian government, for example, with the Free Syrian Army. and there's kind of these tenuous links, or Russia, for example, you know, but then there are governments that are very active, maybe a bit more behind the scenes, such as the US and the UK, who subpoena a lot for information. Yeah, Chinese hackers. Yeah, that they are very much into hacking. Yes. Facebook feature for journalists. Yes, I will look for that, and I'm not sure where I can post that actually. Maybe you can email me, and I will send it to you.
Again, I've shared the email, but I will do it again. And I think I missed another question from Jason about fitness apps, and are they vulnerable as well as far as location and personal information?
Yes, they are. So any app you use that is collecting data on you. So I mean, this goes for dating apps, you know, fitness apps, you know, all these kind of apps. They're collecting a lot of data, and fitness apps are particularly concerning because they store your location data and they kind of map it out for you. There was a very big data breach. Well, in fact, it wasn't. I think the company actually published the information online. There was at Strava a couple of years ago, and they published they accidentally gave away US military bases because US Army people were using it to run, and they were obviously running around the base, and then they obviously that kind of mapped out the base in different countries around the world. So if you are using a fitness app, one of them was very recently targeted last week. There's so many data breaches now, I don't even remember. Then yes, be aware that your location data can be leaked and will probably be sold online. You know, that may or may not be a risk for you in terms of kind of your work, but you know, it's never great that your personal information is leaked somewhere online and is bought and sold by criminals. So just to be aware. I mean, you should research. So before you use any app or any service, online service, you really want to be doing some research on, you know, how secure is that company. You wouldn't buy a car without doing research into, you know, how economical it is, or, you know, how secure it is, or, you know, is the car dealership that you're buying from, are they kind of, you know, well respected in the area? And it's the same for a technical tool, and people don't tend to do this. So just Google the app that you want to use and just see if it's had any data breaches. Just say, have a look and see kind of, you know, what do they do with your data? Are they selling it to third parties? Have each tech company now, most tech companies, so big tech companies, have to release a transparency report each year, which details, you know, governments that have, you know, requested user data and whether that data has been handed over. So it might be useful for you guys to have a look at that and just to get an idea of, you know, what governments are up to and what information they're interested in. So I hope, Jason, that answered your question. Any more questions? Yeah. And just kind of general monitoring. Yeah, I would say, I'm just reading through. Yeah, there we go. That's all the questions. I think we've covered them. So yeah, just to conclude, don't be downhearted. It really is about kind of taking back control of your content on the internet and just looking, you know, what information is out there, what information can you easily remove, and then kind of anything that's very vulnerable, you know, you just want to just be deleting that. And please sign up for these data removal, data broker removal site services. It really will save you a lot of hassle. I mean, it won't protect you 100%, but it will get rid of kind of, you know, the general kind of population looking at your address. And please reach out to me at any time. I'm happy to speak to you. I can do one-to-one sessions as well if people need them.
So thank you again for coming here today. I've been sharing information on our election safety toolkit, digital safety toolkit, on our online, on our Twitter handle, hashtags. And I've also included some information on, other than our emails, a way for you guys to sign up with us to receive periodic election safety information. But again, any questions, please do reach out to the election safety email or to Ella directly. And as Ella mentioned, we can organize one-on-one sessions with Ella and with our colleagues who do physical safety as well. So please reach out. We're here to help. And thank you so much for being here. Ella, any parting words?
No, I think that's it. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and your weekend, and good luck with your digital safety. Spend 10 minutes on a Sunday morning looking through your Facebook account.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, people. Bye.